Let's talk about Form 965D, and I want to talk to you about what it is, how to file it. Here's the approach I really want you to pay attention to. I want you to look right now on the screen. This is Form 965D, and this form actually is the titled Transfer Agreement under Section 965I2. And so you can see here that in Part 1, you have the transferor information, and in Part 2, you have the transferee information. So transfer information, you put the first name, last name, you put the address, you put the taxpayer identification number. Now the TIN can be your social security number or your EIN. So that's for the transferor. That's pretty straightforward. For the transferee, you actually have basically, again, first name, last name, and the address also, and also the TIN. And what you want to really specify here is the identified information of the S corporation with respect to to which the Section 965I election was effective. So it's one of those things where, again, when we talk about the S corporation itself in Part 3, you have to put the corporation's, the S corporation's first name, not first name, S corporation's name, and then you have to put the EIN. So it's one of those things, again, where you always have to put the name and the EIN or the social security number. Or the TIN for that matter. And part four relates to the triggering events leading to the transfer agreement. And so on line 1 of part 4, you have to put the date of the triggering agreement. I'll speak about the triggering events, if you will, later on, not agreement, but triggering events. So basically, you have to answer line 2 if this is applicable to you, death of the transferor. And you have to put the percentage of transfers here on line 3. And part 4 is all about providing a detailed description of the triggering event. And part 5, that's basically the report on unpaid section 965I, net tax liability. And part 6, you can see on the screen here, part 6 is all about the transferee's ability to pay the remaining liability. The IRS just wants to make sure that taxpayers can fulfill their tax obligations. And part 7, you can see on the screen here, part 7 actually relates to terms of agreements. So basically you are, going through whatever, you have to agree, and the transferor will have to sign, and so does the transferee. Boss, welcome back to the show. I really appreciate having you here. We're having a conversation about Form 965D. The thing here is that when we talk about Form 965D, we are obviously talking about the TCJA, and particularly we are speaking about Section 965. So the TCJA, this is the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, and so within this section of Form 965D, you are able to have a certain U.S. shareholders defer the net tax liability for accumulated foreign earnings deemed repatriated under Section 965A. And the cool thing is that here you have a flexibility because you are able to pay the liability in installments over 8 years. So this is kind of cool. So the purpose of the Form 965D is pretty straightforward. Basically, Form 965D is actually relevant for taxpayers who are elected to pay the transition tax and installments under Section 965H. And the cool thing is that 965D is used to report the transfer of the specified portion of the tax liability to another person. So that's why I showed you a little earlier when I said transferor and transferee. Okay, and the transferee typically is an affiliated corporation as part of an agreement made under Section 965I2. And so the cool thing here is that the Form 965D provides information about the taxpayers, the taxpayer, the transferee, the amount of liability transferred, and the other details. So it's one of those things where you have to be as transparent as possible. One thing I want to see here is that when we talk about the Form 965 in general, especially the D clause, the D provision, if you will, you are talking about transparency not only in the way you manage your taxes internally, domestically, if you will, within the United States, but also all your foreign connections in terms of taxes. So it's one of those things where if you want to repatriate your earnings at some point, it's just a lot better to do it through 965D. That allows you to do things legally It has also alleviated the amount of taxes you have to pay and the amount of fines and penalties you have to pay also. Plus, I want to quickly remind you of today's topic. We are having a conversation about Form 965D. I want to talk about the benefits, because when we talk about Form 965D, of course, we are speaking about a clause that allows you to comply with the tax laws, but also save on taxes. Okay, so you have transition tax calculation, you have reduced tax liability. This is very important. You have repatriation of foreign earnings. You have installment payment option. You have compliance with tax regulations. Let's quickly go through some of those elements here. So when we talk about transition tax calculation, you have to understand that this Form 965D allows you to calculate and report the transition tax on previously untaxed foreign earnings. And this is kind of cool. And this tax provision was actually introduced under the TCJA to transition the U.S. international tax system from a worldwide system to a territorial system. And when we have a reduced tax liability, this is also really good in terms of making sure that businesses are able to plan their tax situations appropriately. And so you also have the repatriation of foreign earnings. So basically, this is basically the repatriation of previously untaxed foreign earnings held by U.S. shareholders of foreign corporations. So by reporting and paying the transition tax, taxpayers can bring those earnings back into the United States and invest them in the domestic economy. So this is kind of important to really think about things from that point of view. At least that's what the legislator thought about. And when we talk about, you also have another benefits here. You have the ability to have installment payment option. So you are basically instead of 1 year, you have 8 years. So 8 years. So you have the ability to get things done, and so you are able to spread the tax liability over several years instead of paying the full amount upfront. And so one thing I want to say is that you are able to get this thing done, but this is a one-time thing though, okay? And now it's important to really understand that interest charges may apply to the deferred installments. You're not getting penalties, you're not getting fines, but you will be paying interest. But the bottom line here is that you can avoid actually potential penalties and legal issues associated with non-compliance. And again, it's one of those things where you have to take action real fast to make sure that you comply with all the essential provisions of the law. So let's talk about how to complete actually this form here. So Form 965D. So basically, you want to gather the paperwork, everything that relates to 965D. So we're speaking about the transfer, details of the transfer agreement, and the specific amounts being transferred. Okay, and you have to obtain the official form. So 965D, don't get it from a third-party website. You want to get it from the IRS, and then you want to review the instructions because the instructions are changing all the time. You want to complete the header section. So I showed you a little earlier what really the form is all about. You want to provide information about the transfer agreement. So again, going back to what I said about the transfer law and the transfer rate, you want to calculate and report the transfer amounts. You want to attach supporting documentation. You always want to attach supporting documentation just in case the IRS is asking questions. You do not want them to ask questions first before you actually providing information. And what you want to do is when we talk about supporting the documentations, we're speaking about copies of the transfer agreement or any other relevant documentation requested by the form. So it's one of those things where the form will let you know which one is really working for them and which one is not working for them. And so once you're done, you're satisfied with everything written down, you want to review and verify. So double check all the information entered on the form, and you want to do this for accuracy and completeness. You want to review the form, supporting documents, and calculations to ensure that they actually align with the instructions. And once you're pretty comfortable with everything, just file. I mean, it's pretty straightforward, and just sign and submit. And don't forget to date the form though. Form 965D, you have to date it. And so it's one of those things where you have to follow the instructions provided with the form to determine where and how to submit it, and retain a copy of the completed form and any supporting documentations for your own record. So again, so if something were to happen, at least you know that you have abided by your taxpayers' ability. Also, I want to quickly remind you of today's topic. We are having a conversation about the Form 965D. There are some special considerations when it comes to those forms, so 965D. So first of all, you have to think about eligibility. So we are speaking about you meet the eligibility criteria for filing this form 965D. So generally, taxpayers who have made a transfer agreement under Section 965I2 and have a net tax liability of at least $1 million in the aggregate under Section 965 are required to file this form. And also the reporting requirements. So we are speaking about transfer agreements. So you should provide the necessary details of the agreement, including the names and tax identification numbers of all parties involved, the agreement's identification number, and also the transfer agreement amount. And in terms of calculation of installments, the transition tax liability can be paid in installments over 8 years. Again, we are referring to 8 years. That's actually the time frame that the IRS has put in place. And also the tax filing and payments. Here we are speaking about Form 965 being filed by April 15th to 2023, 24, 25, 25. And so the thing is that 965B is good with C and D because this form is part of a broader compliance process related to the transition of the tax section 965. So you may need to coordinate the filing of Form 965D with other forms, such as a Form 965A and also Form 965B, Corporate Report of Net 965 Tax Liability. In all cases, boss, if you really need help, it's always better to consult with the tax professional because that professional will give you a more granular idea about your situation, depending on your circumstances, but also depending on your state of incorporation, because everything that I just told you so far is about the federal tax filing of this form. But there are cases where you might need to file Form 965D also, I would say at the state level. I mean, the form might have a different name, but the process could be similar in terms of repatriating some taxes that you have accumulated over several years overseas. So repatriate those taxes, that income, and actually reinvest it in the domestic economy. Let's talk about Form 965D, how to file it. You have several ways to file this form, and so you have offline filing. So this is manual filing. You have online filing, and you have e-filing. So when we talk about offline filing, this is you make sure that you download the form from the IRS website. Do not actually download it from a third-party website. You want to download it from the IRS website, www.irs.gov. And so you want to fill out the form. So complete the form by providing all the necessary information as required. Follow the instructions provided with the form to ensure accuracy. And you want to prepare supporting documentations. So what you want to do is you want to gather any supporting documents required to accompany the form. So this may include all kinds of forms, all kinds of I would say documentation. So everything has to relate to the transfer agreement under Section 965I2. And you want to create copies of the completed Form 965D and all supporting documents for your records. It's always important to have a record, and you submit the documents and confirm receipts. Once the IRS receives your information, the agency will let you know, and you want to save that notification in your records. So that's for offline filing, aka manual filing. And then you have online filing, and then you have e-filing. So now online filing is not possible with a Form 965D. So the IRS does not provide an online filing option for that form. Therefore, online filing is not available for this particular form. And also the thing here is that since the IRS does not offer an electronic filing option for Form 965D, you cannot file this form using software. So you So the only option that you have here when it comes to Form 965D is actually manual filing. And one thing I want to say here is that when we speak about Form 965D, we are speaking about a form that actually talks about the transfer agreement. But make sure that all other documents that really are that will help you actually that actually will help you substantiate your claims. All those documents are saved properly because again, you want to have those documents in case the IRS wants to inquire a little further. I want to talk to you about a few mistakes to avoid while filing Form 965D. And so you want to make sure that you do not have incorrect or incomplete information. You do not want to have a missed filing deadline, inadequate supporting documentation in case of multiple corporations that are involved. You want to also follow instructions. So failure to follow instructions is also an important element to really stay away from. Incorrect calculation of amounts, and also please retain copies. You always want to retain copies just in case. It's one of those things where when we talk about accountability, we're also talking about making sure that you are thinking about your taxes not only now but also in the future. So you want to retain copies, and you also want to make sure that you are staying abreast of relevant changes in tax laws or regulations. And so especially when it comes to the regulations that may impact the filing requirements for Form 965D. So do not ignore those changes at all. Okay. So overall, when we talk about Form 965D, this is basically an important element that allows you to pay in installments, whatever taxes you may owe on repatriated earnings, and so you are able to pay in installments. So you're able to manage your cash flow effectively. And so please make sure, no matter what, if you have to consult a tax professional, it's just better to actually reach out to someone who understands your situation, who actually works preferably locally, so you can actually walk to that person's office and explain the situation from A to Z. And so it's always better. Or you can also ask questions in the comment section. Our team members will actually get back to you. They'll answer all questions that you have. And it's one of those things where you have to be comfortable with your information. So when you reach out to us, please, you want to mention your state and city, and also you can provide some background information about the Form 965D before we actually know exactly how the clauses of the law, the TCJA, apply to your specific situation. And the bottom line here is that please remember, you cannot file this form electronically. You cannot file this form also through an e-file provider. You have to file this form manually. So this means that you have to know what you're doing. Otherwise, you could actually be making mistakes big time. Thank you so much for your attention. I really appreciate it. Let's quickly do a recap of today's conversation. So I spoke to you about Form 965D. So I gave you the approach, and we also talked about the steps when it comes to completing this form. And now I'm doing the recap. Thank you so much. God bless you. I'll speak to you another time. Until then, remember, stay marvelous.